Welcome to my third game in the Intermezzo Championship Season 12. This was actually the fifth game finished in my group, so it's the last one that was completed for the first half of games released. This is actually my first game against Kimmo and my second game against Skaiwalker, but let's just jump right into this. Going over the leaders and wonders, I usually like starting from 3 downwards, so there's Hollywood, Spaceflight as the generally large point getters. Also kind of like Red Cross to look at as well. It's also another one that can get potentially pretty big. So for Hollywood, you have support from Marlene and Chaplin. With Spaceflight, you can look more into Einstein, Gates, and somewhat Sid Meier. And then there's also an internet, which Sid Meier works really well with, since each computers is 9 for internet, so you only need 3 computers total. Something else to also look at is that there's Mandela, which could it be a capper to a colonization strategy, and that actually works well with fast food chains as well, with more population, more colonies. These two wonders kind of go together because they don't require the same type of resource. In order to lead into Marlene, in order to lead into Marlene or Chaplin, you have Shakespeare. There's no Bach. There's Gaudi, who is also kind of a theater-ish leader. Then there's Darwin that can go into Einstein or Gates or Meier. Nobel also kind of does the same thing. Then there's, I can look at Watt. Railroad is also a thing as well. And just generally good leaders, generally good is Catherine, and situationally good is Maximilian or Robespierre. Then looking at the H1 leaders, there isn't too much militarism going on. You have 2 strength-based ones a little bit with Joan and Kahn. 2 a little bit more on the culture side with Gutenberg and Michelangelo. 2 that are like more colonization with Columbus and Eleanor. Then you have Leo, who's can lead into Shakespeare pretty well. Gutenberg leads into Shakespeare pretty well. But Leo actually is a very good transition leader, going into like Leo into Darwin into Gates or Einstein or something along those routes where you go the science heavy way. Looking at the beginning, there is a Sun Tzu Colossus, but we saw that there was no like Suez or Cook, so there shouldn't really be a huge colonization strategy. Just kind of noting that he's there, since I think Sun Tzu is kind of one of those leaders that you really have to pay attention to, since he can kind of work the game a bit, especially since there's only 2 knights available. Basically, if there's Sun Tzu in the game and you don't get knights, you really want to try and grab Khan, just so you don't fall behind in strength. Oh, sorry, I didn't even go over my first turn. So my first choice, I take Hammurabi. It's basically a choice between any of the 3 leaders. I always advocate for picking a leader as opposed to any yellow card. Sorry, I always advocate for picking a leader or a wonder in your first set of turns, or your first turn. And for me, Hammurabi and Confucius are kind of close. Sun Tzu could also be up there a lot of the time, but like I said, there's no colonization at all, so I really wouldn't pick him. And for me, the reason I picked Hammurabi here is because I didn't want to feel pressured in strength from Sun Tzu in the least. So Confucius is forced to cede while Hammurabi isn't. And although I do lack a military action, I am also in first position, so I shouldn't have too much trouble defending. I just don't want to really force myself to run into strength events if I don't have to. Skaiwalker picks Confucius, urban growth, which I think make a lot of sense. He probably just not as concerned about that Sun Tzu thing that I was, but they're both, like I said, I think Hammurabi and Confucius are pretty close in strength regardless. And then Kimmo picks Cleopatra, frugality. So pretty much everyone's on the economical side. Alright, so of the wonders that fell, the only one, we started with Stonehenge Colossus. The only other wonder that fell was Hanging Gardens. There was also pyramids and Colosseum, but they didn't fall. So we have kind of more low-powered A wonders, considering most people would consider them low-powered. But I'm pretty happy, getting Stonehenge and Engineering Genius on 1 civil action, so I just take it. The only one that I really wouldn't consider being worth taking is Colossus. I think that it provides no real economical value, no real colonization strategy, so I think that this is perfectly fine to skip. do think Hanging Gardens is still a pretty good wonder, because it does provide some kind of benefit. But Skywalker, he does skip the first wonder. He uses Urban Growth to build a lab first, and then takes Richland instead. So he just decided to skip AJ Wonder. Kimmo goes for Cleo, also builds a lab, and then also skips AJ Wonder. So they're both deciding to skip AJ. It is easier for Kimmo to skip AJ because if Skywalker skips AJ, then neither of them are as susceptible to Ravages of Time. I'm the only one who really would want to seed it, since I can more easily get rid of Stonehenge than they can more easily get rid of whatever AJ Wonder to pick up. So here I take Monarchy, Alchemy. I'm kind of eyeing this Leonardo out here. And I finish the rest of my turn by building a couple steps in Stonehenge. Basically, I'm kind of hedging between either going for Monarchy next turn or going for building Alchemy outright. I certainly don't want to build the intermediary step of the Philosophy, and that's basically why I kind of play it this way. As in addition, I also want to keep this population floating, and I also don't mind getting extra food from not having any consumption right now. Skywalker seeds, flips development markets, goes for Silk Road, starts it, uses Richland A effectively, and takes a breakthrough. So while Silk Road is a wonder that takes a lot of steps, the only real downside, it is a very cheap wonder, and it's pretty nice to be able to use those yellow cards right away. Kimmo, he wants to use the Cleopatra bonus, so he spends his first he spends a huge bunch of resources going for Himeji. I actually think that this is kind of a mistake. I think that it's still probably better to build your mine to get some production going, even though that not using Cleo for a turn is like building a mine. This is not the wonder that you want to start off with. Himeji is it's just 9 resources, or 7 in Kimmo's case, for 2 strength, and that's just not really where you want to put your first set of resources. It's very expensive, and this is kind of the problem with going for Cleopatra without picking up an Age A wonder. I think that going for Hanging Gardens would have been a lot better, since it could cost only 3 resources over 3 steps, and actually provide some kind of economical benefit for you, which is to not have to have a happiness solution, at least a temporary one. So I go for Leo, since it is. So first off, I see Uncertain Borders. I'm a little bit ambitious with this one. Kimmo does have extra strength in his wonder, but I'm thinking that I'm in the first position. I probably won't get affected by it as much, as long as I can build military first. Even if I don't build military, there's a pretty good chance that other players won't build military because I'm not seeded. If I don't build it, then they don't feel pressured by strength as much. So I'm kind of hoping just to be a little sneaky, a little lucky, and yeah. So we got Civil Life. I use Civil Life to develop my alchemy. I had the choice of waiting for Leonardo to get 6 so that I can build an alchemy straight up. But what I decided to do instead is I kind of think about a lot of options here, which is, do I increase population? Do I finish my wonder? Do I go into consumption when I increase population? Or do I even develop this alchemy at all, and maybe just go for monarchy first? In the end, I decided that I want to not be in consumption and just upgrade to get pretty much most of the bonus of Leo already, because that's just the +1 from the upgrade. So it's like a +2 science upgrade. And then finish Stonehenge so that I'll have enough science next turn. And I take this Engineering Genius. I do kind of hesitate to take this Engineering Genius. Maybe I could have gone for the Richland. I didn't really want to leave Iron on 1 to make it so easy for Skywalker to go into. But in the end, I decide that this Engineering Genius is a little bit too valuable to skip. I'm not going to be the one who gets Iron, or even if I am, I'll be the second player to get Iron, and just having this 3 resources in hand to go for another wonder does make it a lot easier if I am on bronze or not. So, because I left iron on 1, of course Skywalker is going to go for it. He flips Development of Warfare, increases pop, takes the iron, and just goes for iron. Pretty simple. Not too much with that. Kimmo, Seeds, gets Fulfillment of Crafts, finishes Himeji, so again, I just don't believe that this is what you want to do with your first set of resources, but it is what it is. He doesn't have alchemy. He didn't have a better wonder to go for at the time. But going for all of this 7 resource production or 7 resources into Himeji, I really think sets him back quite a bit. Yes, he has more strength. He'll probably win the uncertain borders that I have in here, but he doesn't actually know that, right? If you just look at his economy compared to mine and compared to Skywalker, just being on 2 resource production, not as much science as me, not as much resource production as Skywalker, it actually feels pretty terrible. Yeah, so I would never have Himeji as my first wonder. It just doesn't seem right. Or even if it's my first wonder, I probably won't be finishing it until Age 2, or at the very end, Age 1. So anyways, I don't seed. I don't know where this Vast is going. I do have a little bit of advantage because I will be one of the players with 3 military actions, but I decided not to seed. I didn't plan on getting any stronger this turn, so I didn't want to really hurry up into that uncertain borders that I seeded. Increase pop, build my alchemy straight up, take a rich land, and take a warfare. I do like warfare on 1. I think it's a pretty solid card. Even though it's a 3-player game, I still think it's a pretty solid card. If you want to build up military in H2 and still be able to draw 3, it's not easy to do unless you have some sort of extra military action, of course, right? Skywalker Seeds, Dome Settlement, and then unfortunately he goes for Swordsman, which makes me kind of sad. And then starts building the Silk Road and increases his mine production. I was really hoping that he would just upgrade twice or something and stay weak, but he decides to get stronger, and I'm not going to be... If Uncertain Borders flips, it is a 1 in 5 chance, and that is the risk I decided to take, but can't really do anything about it now. Alright, Kimmo Seeds, and Skywalker does win Uncertain Borders. So yeah, I mean, I got punished for doing something stupid, and that's just what it is. Kimmo goes for Printing Press, again uses his Cleo bonus, and then finally builds a mine. I do think that losing this production is kind of a big deal early on. And yeah, something about building this Printing Press, he doesn't have Leo, because I have it. He's not going to be building it with, like, Gutenberg, because he's already gone. Going for printing presses kind of actually relegates you to being weak because your population is spread out more than you want it to be. He doesn't have if he had Hanging Gardens, or if he had this Forbidden City, then maybe it'll be a little bit more stomachable to go spread your population like this. But having 2 philosophy and a printing press can sometimes stretch your population too thin to be able to continue being to give you long-term weakness, basically. So here, I see the cartography. I have a couple defense cards, and I'm pretty frustrated that I lost a yellow token on that 1 in 5 flip. So I decided that I'm going to win it back, or win some yellow tokens back. So I see the Vast, and then just go for the cartography right here. I don't really mind being weak in this case. I do have the Reign of Terror, so the only other really bad one is Border Conflicts. But my things are cheap. I can rebuild them. It's not the worst. And I pick up the Bread and Circus as well. This is a chance that I could have gone for Forbidden City, but because I was pretty adamant about going for the colonies, I decided to go for the cartography instead of Forbidden City. But this engineering genius, it really was meant for something like this, and I just completely decide against it. And it's nice that I can pick up this develop too, so I justify getting the cartography a little bit more. Skaiwalker Seeds, flips Raiders. Not the worst strength event, so it's totally fine. He finishes Silk Road, upgrades Warrior, picks up Urban Growth. Yeah, I was pretty surprised that he didn't decide to go for Code of Laws here. Didn't really need to finish Silk Road in order to get out of Corruption. He could have just upgraded as well. So it is a very interesting choice to not pick up that 5th Civil Action right here. Even if there was Corruption, I still think it would have been worth it. Getting out of 4 Civil Action land is like a pretty big place. It's a pretty big thing to do. And being a Confucius, you have a lot of science. I don't see why not. Alright. Kimmo. Seeds. Flips Pestilence. Did not. I'm not exactly sure who put that in, but it doesn't really affect anybody. He increases pop. Builds a temple to use Cleopatra again. I'm not exactly sure that's what you want to do. I think that it probably would have been a better idea to increase production in some way, especially because he's lacking in resources. Going for a religion, yes, I get that maybe you want the religion anyways for happiness things, but as we can see in his yellow bank, it's not actually enough to deal with the transition. So he's going to need to get the theology as well, and sometimes you just want to do that in one step. So this is kind of like a waste of civil actions in my opinion when he's doing it this way. Something better that could have happened is gone for iron, gone for irrigation, something like that to increase his production. But basically what he's decided is that he's wanted a lot of culture in the beginning, and I think that going for this kind of build is pretty dangerous. Going for very high going for like a medium amount of culture in Age 1 tends to lag your economy quite a bit. And although he will get to 5 civil actions this turn, it's just going to take a lot more in order to catch up. He actually does leave the iron for me, which I was a little bit surprised about. But there's not enough science in his build to go for it anyway, so I can kind of see what he's doing. I kind of see why he didn't do that. So, with the iron there, first off I see the developed territory, flips science. With the iron there, I decide that I'm just going to go for it. Yep. Nothing really else besides that. Skaiwalker proceeds, flips Knowledge of the Ancients. I did not see that, so I was a little bit surprised. Somebody else seeded it, which is great. You know, I get an extra science over the other two. It's not a huge difference, but it is a difference nonetheless. Skaiwalker increases pop, takes irrigation, and then goes for irrigation. I'm not exactly sure why he decides to go for irrigation as opposed to continuing iron, but that is the decision he makes. Kimmo takes Columbus. There is only one more card in Age 1, so he kind of does it just in time. This Columbus takes Breakthrough, which he needs more science. Definitely approve. Goes for the irrigation. And unfortunately, because he didn't go for irrigation last turn, he will not have enough food to increase his population. So I'm assuming that he has a colony, since he did go for Columbus as opposed to Eleanor. But it would have to be exactly historic or inhabited to be able to deal with his happiness issue that he may or may not have. So I go ahead here and see Barbarians. Kimmo is the one who's the weakest, and he has the highest culture production. So he does need to deal with that. It's definitely not going to hit me, is my real thing. Scientific Breakthrough, I did not see this one. I seeded 2 colonies into this deck, so this is really nice for me to see. And because Scientific Breakthrough hits, I do kind of go for this weird turn. I would have probably gone for Code of Laws anyways. I do think that the extra civil action would be super valuable. And because this Great Wall, another wonder that I really would have liked to use with my Engineering Genius is on 3. I decided to not go for it. I guess what I decided is that I value the Code of Laws more than the Great Wall, and that I can just use my resources on an Age 2 wonder. You know, there's quite a few good ones. There's Ocean Liner or Railroad, which is great. Kremlin could be very good as well. Statue, not so good when you're only on Monarchy, but it's still not a bad one. I would probably never pick up Louvre unless I've had Justice System, because I really don't like dealing with that corruption issue. Especially if I plan on trying to win Vast, I'll lose even more blue tokens. I can't really afford that. So it would have been nice to go for this Great Wall, but it was just one action too expensive, since if I develop Code of Laws, I can't get out of corruption this way. So what instead I do is that I do a lot of developments here, and just kind of, I go for my impact of variety in H2, That's kind of what I do. There was the option of taking Code of Laws and taking Great Wall and then doing nothing else. But I just felt like that kind of felt a little dumb. It might have actually been worth it though, to just take the Code of Laws, play it next turn. I didn't want to have corruption, of course, so I really wouldn't play the Code of Laws if I did that. And I still could have been able to finish Great Wall next turn. But like I said, there's plenty of good wonders. I'm not really forced to take this one here, even though I do think it'd be good for my civilization. I still have, plenty of happy faces from the Spread and Circus. I do plan on trying to win the colonies if it happens. So I don't necessarily need the happy face, and the strength is relatively good, but it is kind of a lot just for one culture, one happy face, Oh, and also I do decide to skip knights and stuff. I figure I have plenty of science, I have iron already. Going for H2 techs directly is probably the way that I want to go. Skywalker takes Great Wall, takes Eleanor, gets out of corruption with this upgrade, and pretty much it. Kimmo does have the inhabited territory, so he doesn't have to deal with happiness issues. Goes for knights, goes to the strongest, takes engineering genius 2, and Louvre. I don't approve of this at all. I really don't approve of this. I think that this is a really big mistake to go for. I think that if you want to do something with your actions, I really think that he had 4 actions remaining before doing these. I think that if he takes coal and reserves, I think he's doing a lot better in this game. But he goes for Louvre right away, and I just can't approve of it, really. I think that this is very expensive. It's just culture. I think you don't have any extra blue tokens. I'm not a fan of this at all. And then as for his last action, he takes those reserves, knowing that he'll need more resources for his stuff. But again, reserves 1 is a very slow card, and I don't know if this is exactly what you want to take at this point. So here I seed. Ooh, I don't remember what I seed here, but it's okay. Won't really go back. I think I see it historic 2. I think I see it historic 2, since I still have the colonization advantage. I have more military actions than my opponents, so I can hold more cards. And from here, I kind of just take a bunch of things. I also upgrade my iron one last time. And if I did have an extra action, I would have played... Sorry, if I didn't have corruption issues, I probably would have played architecture out here on this turn instead of taking those reserves for 1. The reason being is because I want to use this engineering genius, and I think that I can get this ocean liner. Skywalker still has to have his Great Wall. Kimmo has his Louvre. So I think that I'm pretty much guaranteed this ocean liner, and I would have liked to play this architecture out. But because of corruption, I can't, and that's just this very small thing where I take those reserves instead. It does kind of mean that it might be very difficult for me to use this engineering genius next turn, since I'm going to have 15 resources if I go for a wonder, and that's just a lot to go with. So we'll see. I would have definitely liked to spend my actions developing something as opposed to counting on reserves, but that's just what it is. Also, I don't take the ocean liner this turn because I don't believe that it'll fall off with so many cards in between. It would basically require Skywalker to take 2 of Opera Reserves and Urban Growth, and I just think that he's going to spend more of his actions finishing upgrading or just finishing Great Wall. I don't think that he would generally spend a lot of that time doing this. If, on the other hand, Constitutional Monarchy was moved over 1 space because it falls off into the 1 section, if Constitutional Monarchy was flipped over 1 more, then maybe I'd be a little bit more worried about that. But because if you take Hanwha and develop it, you still only have enough actions to barely finish Great Wall. So I'm just not as worried about Ocean Liner falling off as maybe other people would be. Clearly, I didn't seed Historic in the other one since it's right here. So I really can't remember what I seeded at the moment, but it'll come up. So basically, Skywalker, he seeds and then flips develops. The last 2 cards are my colonies anyways. I know that one was developed, one was fast. Win it relatively cheaply. And then basically Skywalker does exactly what I predict, which is take Hanwha, develop it, finish Great Wall, and not take the cards there, which I think makes sense. I think that if he upgraded twice and then took 2 cards, I think that would be not the most efficient use of his actions, so it wouldn't be as good for him, but it would be really bad for me in terms of Ocean Liner. But at the same time, I really wouldn't have worried too much about my food, since I do plan on still getting the vast territory, since I won develop for so cheap, and then there's 2 selective breedings that fell down. Alright, Kimmo, seeds, flips fast. I also win this for pretty cheap. And then Cole's already fallen off, so he can't go for that. Goes for this Monarchy pretty late. Takes the reserves, goes for strategy, increases pop, upgrades here. So, yeah, like I said, Ocean Liner didn't fall off. Kimmo couldn't really increase his production, and I do believe that this loop is probably going to sit here for a little bit. This, even though he has 6 resources, this it would still be really expensive for him to finish loop for a while. I think that if he focused on Cole earlier, I think he easily could have focused on going for Cole this turn instead of Monarchy. But this is kind of just the choice that he made. Right, so I seed Historic now, flip Science, and I kind of debated on this turn. In my last game, I had made this really big discussion about Skywalker winning Vast, and then taking Ocean Liner, and that's kind of feels like a very similar situation. So in his situation, he sent quite a bit of units. He spent like a phalanx in order to win a vast territory, which I had planned on winning. Then I said that was a big mistake because he already had Ocean Liner picked up. In this case, I'm kind of doing it in the other order, so I thought this would be kind of analogous. So I really kind of think about the situation here and why that's different, and if one is actually better than the other. Because selective breeding, going for 2 of them, is actually quite an effective use of my resources and my turn this time, and I still decide against it. And I decide against it even at the expense of not being able to use Engineering Genius here, because I don't want to be in corruption once again. So basically, if I went for selective breeding, it'd be a little bit easier on my resources. I wouldn't be in corruption as easily as I would be for Ocean Liner, since it takes more actions to do. And the reason I do this, that I still go for Ocean Liner, is because that I think it'll save me civil actions in the long run. When Ocean Liner is actually in use, it effectively gains you a civil action because you never need to spend an action increasing population for that turn. So effectively, I have an extra civil action. And then it's also much earlier in the game. There's still 30 cards left in this deck. So if I estimate maybe 8 or 9 turns left in this game, I can use Ocean Liner quite a bit more than Skywalker could. So I think it kind of pays for itself a little bit more. Additionally, because I don't actually have my food solution, and Skywalker did in that game. He actually had his food solution built out already. He had Machu Picchu with irrigation developed, and I don't have my food solution yet. I don't actually need to spend the science like he did and the action with my food solution. So what's happening here is that I'm using my extra yellow tokens as my food solution, albeit temporarily, and I can still go for Ocean Liner with a pretty maximal effectiveness going on this turn. So like I said, I go for the Ocean Liner, play Architecture, develop Cannon, finish Ocean Liner. I cannot use this Engineering Genius because I would be in corruption here. And the reason I can't be use my Engineering Genius is because I'm just short one blue cube, basically. If I was holding 4 resources, it would be 2 on iron instead of 1 on bronze, but yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, so unfortunately, I can't use this Engineering Genius that I picked up, so maybe I can use it on a different one, but I don't have nearly as many resources sitting. I probably need to build some cannons or some kind of military tech along the way, so this Engineering Genius might be kind of a wasted pick at this point. Unfortunately, I don't even have enough civil actions to pick up selective breeding, so that would be my very long-term solution for food. But at the very least, that's quite a ways away since I still have quite a bit of yellow wing to go through. Skywalker seats, flips Dark Ages. I couldn't really do much about that. Obviously, Kimmo seated this. And he goes for Nobel, grabs cannons, switches, goes for Organized Religion, efficient upgrade, and then develops and builds Organized Religion. I imagine he does this because it's pretty much the most effective way to get out of corruption, since Organized Religion is a very expensive building, as opposed to increasing his mine production here. I'm not exactly sure if he was able to fit both of these in, but I'm also kind of imagining that maybe he has like a war idea, because he goes for this food production before going for this resource production, which kind of tells me that he needs a little bit more population faster for something, right? And if he needs population as opposed to resources, then he probably wants to increase his strength. He also went for happiness first, and I know that this is my event, so it's not like a rebellion or something that he's preparing for, or immigration or something. I know that this is barbarians, so he's not preparing for anything in particular by going for this as opposed to upgrades, and he's just trying to get like as much population out as he can, is what it looks like to me. All right, Kimmo seeds again, flips barbarians, and he is the weakest, so he has to spend a turn. Oh, he doesn't have to spend a turn doing anything. Goes for Watt, and then goes for coal. So he is in kind of a tight spot, I think. This will definitely help his resource production, but he does leave the breakthrough on. Yeah, like I said, this Louvre is still sitting here. He could have gone for this coal a long time ago. Even though that he wouldn't get the discounts with Watt, I still think the extra production could have been a lot better if he had prepared himself as opposed to taking this Louvre a long time ago. Just to note, like I said, that Skywalker's preparing to probably be pretty aggressive. I do note that in my head. Kimmo has very, very little science at this point. He can't get a military tech out next turn. He can the next turn after, but he is also civil action or military action limited, and then he also has issues with his happiness as well. So just want you to look out for how this 9 is going to be very, very irrelevant very soon, and the reasons leading up to it, because he's not really prepared in that sense. Honestly, I think that if he were a little bit more prepared and he thought about it a little bit more, he would try to get a little bit more population out, eventually preparing for team sports instead, since I don't really need it. Skywalker wouldn't need it either, so you can get team sports instead. Maybe take the urban growth and breakthrough as well, and then just go for his strategy, team sports, building some extra units. That might give him a better idea of how to defend. And I'm saying this because I've done this a lot, which is you don't really need coal or iron in a 3-player game, as long as you have enough civil actions. And 6 is not quite enough, but it's definitely good enough in a sense that you don't necessarily need upgraded production too much. And I'm going to say that a lot of this comes from the cost of how his buildings are set up and going for this printing press and stuff. That he's going to start feeling very stretched out with his population. And he's not really prepared for any upcoming strength pushes at all. So, I kind of note that Skaiwalker did get quite a bit stronger, and I can't really do much about it on this turn. But I do know that I want to sink my resources as much as I can into my military. I have mobile artillery, so I start by building a cannon. There are still 2 cavalrymen left, so I'm totally fine with spending all my resources into my military. Additionally, I did pick up this journalism and opera. My opponents have their H2 leaders already, so I can go for the somewhat greedy Shakespeare. A lot of times I just like taking Shakespeare for the sense that the buildings are cheaper. There's my alternatives to also get stronger is that I could have maybe went for this or prepared for this railroad. But instead I'm deciding that I want to just build military units outright to fulfill my tactic more often. And if I can build these later with this urban growth, the fact that I have architecture, maybe I can make those cheaper as well. I do skip on the breakthrough, but I don't really need it. I have plenty of science. And I have enough resources to go for 2 cavalrymen next turn. Alright, Skaiwalker, he offers me food, which is actually a huge relief. I didn't really want to have to deal with starvation at any point, so this delays it so much that I'm really happy that he offered this to me. Honestly, he might see that like he doesn't want to help Kimmo because his production is quote unquote better than mine, or going to be better. But in my mind, I'm in a lot better spot than Kimmo. Even though I have half the culture, I have way better infrastructure, or way better flexibility for my infrastructure as well. Plus this ocean liner, it helps me so much more than his irrigation does. So I think if Skaiwalker had a chance to take it back, he probably would just offer the food to Kimmo, because this food actually helps me quite a bit more than it helps him. Anyway, Skaiwalker increases population twice and has just enough resources to go for those 2 units. And then he also, he does not reveal any tactic, but you can kind of see what he's going for if he builds a cannon and swordsman as opposed to 2 cannons or something. So you can see that he's really thinking about being stronger here. Alright, anyways, like I said, the team sports falls. So first off, Kimmo plays reserves 1 for 2 resources. I did say the team sports falls, so this would be pretty good for strength and resources, but doesn't really have a lot of science. So things that I would prioritize if I were him would somehow be to get Rifleman, Revolutionary Idea, and Team Sports. That does take a ton of his actions, so it's possible that that's not really easy to do. But I think that they're just necessary cards for him. In any case, Kimmo, he plays his reserves. Upgrades. This is one of the only lines he can use to get out of corruption. And then he uses the rest of his remaining actions to take Rifleman and Revolutionary Idea. By not taking corruption here, though, he doesn't take any happiness solution. And we're about to run up into the end of the age, so I do think that Kimmo is going to have some problems here. I do think that these 2 upgrades were probably too greedy. Basically, I wish his turn was increase pop, build a knight, take team sports, take rifleman, take revolutionary idea, and probably just lose the reserves 1. I basically think that if he's upgrading now, he's not responding to the fact that Skaiwalker is at 20 strength without a tactic, basically. He's only using 2 strength without a tactic, and is going to get smashed here. Any war is really bad for Kimmo, so yeah. I mean, it's pretty obvious to me that Skaiwalker's pushing for a war, so I would imagine that'd be pretty obvious to Kimmo as well. Alright, so here I cede autonomous territory, still have the colonization bonus. Refugees flips, take a cavalryman, since I super highly prioritized it, and then reveal the tactic. I decided to not go for the wave because I know that this wave is only equivalent to a reserves. It's not that big of a deal. Okay, and then yeah, instead of going for the wave, I just decide to use my urban growth and then just build out of journalism. It does take 3 of my resources, so maybe that's a little bit too much. But it wouldn't have been enough to get another army or anything anyways. I could have taken this wave and not built this to get another army, possibly. But I decided not to. If it's like a war over territory, I'll lose by a good amount, but war over territory doesn't affect me too much. If it's war over tech, I still have, plenty of science. It doesn't affect me too much. And yeah, I still think, I look like a lot better, a lot less appealing of a target than Kimmo does, basically. So kind of go a little bit greedy here by going for the journalisms right away. But it only cost me 3 resources, and it's a pretty big benefit to get a little bit more science, some culture production going, and start making Shakespeare stuff a little bit cheaper. Basically, I think this wave is a little bit action expensive, so I just didn't want to spend my actions doing that. And Skaiwalker goes for the war over tech against Kimmo, so Kimmo is going to lose stuff, a lot of stuff, and he ends at 32. He even takes the navigation and goes for it. Good amount of resources to go for these efficient upgrades later, or for these methods later. And ending at 36, which is very, very, very high, of course. There's absolutely no way Kimmo can defend, and he just doesn't have the military actions, so he's in trouble. Kimmo cedes, flips out popularization of science, and goes for rifleman here. And this is as high as he can really get. Doesn't have the resources, takes the wave, and uses engineering genius just to kind of burn the action. Alright, so I'm going to talk about this for a little bit. Kimmo does reveal classic army, but he didn't have enough actions to do it. If he had built the knight last turn, then he would have at least enough for a classic army, so, but it would still only be plus 6 strength, so 21. He'd still get kind of, thrashed by this war over tech. If it was a war over territory, though, just imagine how much damage that would actually happen here. There's a 21 strength difference. Even if he sacks, still loses like 4 tokens or something, which is crazy. So he really needed that happiness solution that he skipped out on both on, and just didn't really prepare for that idea at all. So I think Kimmo was kind of lucky that it's a war over tech and not over war over territory, because this war over territory would just basically be game ending for Skaiwalker. Okay, I do want to mention one more thing, which is, although Skaiwalker could have warred me and probably had a pretty similar result, we can see that the strength difference is only 10 right here. I can't really get much stronger. I can only get 3 stronger, so he could still have taken like a code of laws or an architecture from me in that sense. But in this deck here, I actually have 3 seeds. Kimmo has 1 and Skaiwalker has 1. Or sorry, I have 2 seeds. I have 2 seeds. Kimmo has 2 and Skaiwalker has 1. Events that I didn't really see, and it's possible that Skaiwalker didn't see, where we didn't see anything about arms industry, we didn't see anything about wealthy territory, we didn't see anything about economic progress. But we did see that I put in autonomous. So there's quite a few cards in here that could give me extra resources, and all of them would have given me at least 4. So if Skaiwalker decided to go against me and I somehow flipped extra resources, I would have 10 resources to go for another army, and I would end at 37. So I think that was probably in the back of Skaiwalker's mind when he was warring me, that there was a couple chances that I could get extra resources, and they just didn't want to take the risk of doing a war that basically had no benefit at all, or could actually hurt him a little bit. Decides to just go for the very guaranteed I'm going to get this code of laws and a little bit extra science, as opposed to going for me and kind of risking it. But we know that I only seeded one out of these for extra resources, so it's a pretty low chance. In any case, from here, I see prosperity. See prosperity because I don't want to deal with food later, and I think it could help. Flip historic territory, which I did seed a while ago. And I do win this with both my colonization cards. They're still autonomous in there, but I actually kind of feel like it's difficult for me to deal with. I just kind of decide that the historic is worth enough. I don't really care about the autonomous as much, so yeah. And I just didn't want to send like an extra unit as opposed. So I could have sent like instead of two cards, I could have sent an extra unit for both of those cards, and so like I could have sent this warrior and a knight or something, and then just rebuild. But I kind of wanted to be in a situation where it looked like I could defend. So I do go up to 8 underneath, which means that if I draw one H3 defense card, I could definitely still defend. And then, so I take Shakespeare and Patriotism for extra resources. And then in my last action, I take Rifleman. In theory, the better action is to play Shakespeare and develop opera. But I decided to take this Rifleman because I can't actually defend. And if for some reason Skaiwalker had infiltrate, I didn't want to leave Shakespeare open to an infiltrate. So what I decided to do is that I feel like taking this Rifleman could maybe deter Skaiwalker from getting like an Age 3 tactic as easily with his swordsman. Even though that this defensive army is really, really great already, I just kind of basically waste 2 actions in the best way possible for myself. One more thing that I can mention is that I could go for Darwin here, and it would be an instant +3 culture. But I said this in the last turn as well, when I was preparing for Shakespeare, that I want to use him for his resource discount. I don't actually have like a ton of resources in general, and even though this is kind of a greedy thing to have, Shakespeare, I do think that just building like a couple buildings at 4 instead of 6 could be a little bit easier on my resources. In any case, moving on to Skywalker's turn, he is going to take the Code of Laws and the 2 Science. Oh, actually, did want to mention, I did get really, really lucky by drawing a mechanized army on my very first draw, so it kind of like gives me an extra 5 strength or so. Didn't pick up the defense card, so I am susceptible here, but Skywalker doesn't know that, so at the very least, I look like I can maybe defend. Anyway, Skywalker goes for an annex on Kimmo, which would have been better. You know, I have the better colonies, but at the same time, they don't affect me as much. Like, if he took a Vast, I would still be fine. And if I took a Historic, I would still be fine. Kimmo, on the other hand, losing a Inhabited is a really big loss. And I think Skywalker is deciding that he'd rather take the guaranteed colony with his military actions as opposed to risking the fact that I might be able to defend it. The difference between Inhabited and Vast, or the difference between Inhabited and Historic 2, is very minimal. So, yeah. Anyways, finishes upgrading or upgrades his production a little bit more, takes a couple of yellow cards, and the architecture will also help as well. I believe that Skywalker did not go for the architecture here on this turn because he wanted to take this patriotism and the frugality. So although he could have saved could have saved 2 resources, I believe that he's taking that cost for the extra food and the extra resources here. Kimmo still seeds, so he does know that most of the cards are in his deck, and so we see that this is one of those situations where I could have gotten 2 extra resources, so I would have been able to defend harder. So Arms Industry flips, finishes Louvre, because you really can't do much else with all those resources, and then one of those reasons that I said Louvre is terrible is because he didn't have an extra blue cubes, and he's kind of in this position where he has corruption even though he only has 3 cubes on the table, and this is actually a really big problem to deal with a lot of the time. So I never ever like Louvre unless you have at least like 2 extra blue tokens. He builds a temple to get out of corruption, plays reserves, upgrades, disbands a warrior, and then disbands a philosophy, and you can see how that losing that inhabited territory hurts Kimmo a lot there. He's also kind of in this terrible situation where he doesn't have any science production, so he can't really get any stronger. He can't really deal with his unhappiness for a long time. He would need to wait for natural production of at least 2 more turns after this one to use his rev idea to get pro sports. I do think that basically the situation that he's put himself in, or the situation that he's found himself in, is essentially unwinnable. There's no way he can be in a winning position at this point. Uh, that war kind of crushed, and he just never had like the science to deal with these things. He prioritizing his coal, which does look really appealing when there's Watt, has cost him a lot in this game, I believe. All right, so now I seed um, civil unrest, I believe, and then I get this autonomous. I only spent 1 unit on this, so I was surprised to win this. I thought Skaiwalker would send at least a cannon, and I am so surprised that I win this for 5. And I didn't expect to win it, and I didn't want to win it. I don't actually have enough blue tokens to support this autonomous. I have -3 +1 from here though, but just having this autonomous is actually really hard on my blue bank. So we'll see myself having some issues with that in regards to that later. I really thought Skywalker was going to win it. He only needed to send 1 cannon, but he decided to only send a warrior or a swordsman. So I did win it, and I'm just so surprised. In any case, I build a cannon and rebuild my army. Now I'm using mechanized army, and then I use the rest of my turns to go for an opera. And now I'm in an issue where I have corruption, just like Kimmo is going to have corruption issues. In order to get enough population, I did disband this bread and circus, but I have so many happy faces between the historic and Shakespeare and Stonehenge and the incoming operas that I don't really need to have the arena anymore at any points. Plus, my eventual leader will probably be like Marlene or Chaplin, or if I really, really run away with the game and I feel like it, I can take Gandhi or something. But at the moment, I'm just thinking that operas are good, so I'll build operas. I could also disband an alchemy and build another journalism to get out of corruption, but I decide a little bit against it, and I'm going to have 17 science next turn, so I pick up this democracy and this rich land, which could eventually save me some resources anyways. Pretty nice to pick up these resource aggressions. Kimmo basically can't defend when I'm at 40. He can't really get stronger unless he disbands a lot of things. So I'm pretty much expecting that these are pretty free aggression games. Skywalker seeds, so he probably doesn't have an aggression. And then I talked about the arms industry coming up, the autonomous and economic progress. So 3 out of the 5 cards in this deck would have helped me for that war. So you can really see that if Skywalker went for a war, he was kind of taking a gamble against me at this point. All right, Skywalker takes the military theory, multimedia, and then just goes for multimedia architecture, or multimedia builds outright and then increases population. Couldn't go for the architecture, otherwise we would have had corruption anyways, so it really wouldn't have saved anything. Big cost of this turn was taking this military theory, which probably wasn't necessary. I could have, taken it, but there's a second one out there. But he's probably thinking about his war plans and stuff already and just wanted to guarantee it in his hand. Wasn't necessary though, so I'm not 100% sure. Anyways, Kimmo goes for Mech Ag, uses Revolution idea, and goes for the Mech Ag. I don't really know about this. He's going to have a ton of resources and a ton of food that he can't really use. Honestly, something like Chaplain could actually help him quite a bit. Can't even use it for extra bonus though, but still. I'm not really sure what Kimmo can do in this game really to make sure that he's still in it, but I don't think that he's really in this game anymore, unfortunately. He does have a lead against. He does have a culture lead though. He's actually winning against both of us. But as you see, Shakespeare is gonna really take off in terms of culture production very soon. Air Forces did come, so first do the aggression that I'm pretty sure is guaranteed against Kimmo. Almost guaranteed, not 100% though. Taken extra food to get out a second population here. I would have taken more food, but obviously I actually couldn't because my blue bank was completely empty at that time. So I increase pop twice, do another pair, take the Air Force, and then take a little bit more resources. Again, have corruption, but would have corruption anyways, so at least in that sense, autonomous didn't hurt me too much. Alright, Skaiwalker goes for an aggression, and apparently Kimmo can defend this one, which I thought was surprising. It was very close though. Goes for gates, and then fast food chains, then builds another lab. So unfortunately, Skaiwalker hasn't gone out this architecture for the last couple of turns, and if he had, he actually would have saved quite a few resources because he didn't want to take corruption on one turn, which I felt was reasonable. He's actually lost a lot of value in this architecture now since he's built so many buildings without it. So if he took that corruption like that one turn a while ago, it's a very big possibility that he would have saved like 4 extra resources. Alright, Kimmo goes for Gandhi. I think this is the one chance he thinks that he has to save this game. Takes a revolution idea for these pro sports later, eats corruption because he can't really do much on 5 civil actions. And I hate to kind of say it, but even Gandhi really doesn't help when Skaiwalker can't get 7 military actions. I can still aggress through it. I can even war with the hybrid war with it. But yeah. So unfortunately, this Gandhi is not going to do very much. In 3-player games, there are so many civil actions, or there are so many military actions that it doesn't really help. So I go for the plunder again. Again, I want more population, so I just go for food. Build another pair, take the Hollywood, or take patriotism, take Hollywood, and some more resources. So even though I'm getting corruption every turn, I'm also picking up like 8 resources every turn, so it's not a huge deal. I could be a little bit worried about a war here, but I have Air Force also. I have enough resources. So even still, assuming, for some reason that you could build 3 units, which you can only build 2, I'm still going to be plenty stronger than Skaiwalker with the current setup that we have. It's really these plunders that are helping a lot in this game. Alright, Skaiwalker flips freedom of movement. He actually moves a mine into a cannon, develops the architecture, develops military theory for the Nobel Prize, plays regality, builds a library, pops, and takes the reserves. So, yeah. Looking at Skaiwalker's potential strength from here, he has 31 science and 26 resources. My initial thought is that he can go up to, plus 6 from here, of course. So 49. My initial thought is that he can build like 3 more Air Forces on top of this. So each Air Force, the first 2 are worth 22. So 22 plus 6, 28. And then 1 more on top, about 33. So he can get up to about 76 strength, is my guess with Air Force. I know that I can get up to at least 70 with 2 Air Force. So I think that pretty much no matter what, I'm relatively defendable from this position. I could prepare a little bit. But yeah, just gonna note that he is probably about 76 strength or so. Alright, Kimmo goes for loss of sovereignty against me. I think this is the one, or with me, I think that this is the one chance that he thinks that he can get second. which is fair since he still has a culture lead against Skywalker. But I don't really think it matters, honestly. Goes for the Pro Sports. Goes to Pro Sports, and then gets a little bit stronger with that knight. But it's tough when you're in that situation where you only have one science. So he does end this turn. You know, he's about 15 culture ahead of Skywalker. I do want to note my culture production is absurd right now. So I am feeling extremely confident in this game. I have been for a couple of turns ever since I've been building a pair every turn. Since my culture is going so high, and then I take the one super risky line of finishing Hollywood for 56 right here. Yeah, so this is like probably the one way I can lose. I'm not guaranteed to end the age here, and I spend a lot of resources on this Hollywood right away. Skywalker, we just established, can war me for about 76 if Air Forces drop. And yeah, that's basically what I conclude. And I'm kind of thinking like, whatever, if it happens, it happens. I have a huge culture lead. I gain 30 culture every turn. I should probably be fine. This is definitely very greedy though. I'm completely unwarrable if I don't finish Hollywood, but I decided to do it anyways. So yeah, I also forget to seed this turn. Like I could have seeded Impact of Architecture or Wonders, and both of them would have been fine. But yeah, I'm just kind of riding the fact that I have plus 34 culture. Anyways, Skywalker, and then I take a lot of cards actually after this. I'm kind of trying to force the game to end. We see that there's only 8 cards left at the end of this next turn. 8 cards left, and then Skywalker does war me. The Air Force does come, so he does have quite a bit of strength potential with it, but he actually goes for this modern infantry line instead. And I didn't really see the fact that he had so many military actions to be able to upgrade all of these and still war me and switch the tactic. I didn't really see that he had that much. He actually goes up to 76 or 77 instead of 76. But funnily enough, he disbands an Age 3 library here. So, yeah, I think that's pretty funny. Yeah. He just built this last turn, and it's not often you see somebody destroy a multimedia willingly. But 76 or 77, it's higher than the 70 potential that I have. I only have 19 resources total, so I could potentially build, 2 Air Force and 1 extra H3 unit, so I can go up to like 73, but I have other issues regarding that as well. But anyways, this is what I mean that I could possibly lose the game now that I'm in this position. If Skywalker spent this last couple turns taking Air Force instead of going for playing the reserves and taking computers, he took the Air Force, and then there was another turn on top of this. And he went for 2 Air Force here. Each of the Air Force is worth 17, so he gets up plus 34. So he can get up to about 111 here. And I actually have a much, much lower strength potential than that, even if I include all my resources and stuff. So that is a chance that I could lose since he would be getting up to 111. Rejects the peace treaty, but the thing is that Kimmo does me a favor that I don't have to deal with, which is that he ends the age. So this is kind of nice. Don't have to deal with that extra strength. But I do want to say that even if Skywalker went with another war against me at such a huge amount, we should probably look at my culture count right now, right? Even after losing this war, I have 100 lead going into this turn. And plus every turn I'm getting 30 culture after electing Marlene. It's not like an extra turn would really be that bad for me, I think. Just because my culture production is so high that I can't really have any issues with it, I think. So anyways, I seed Impact of Architecture, take Marlene. I get a little lucky with the Prosperity since it could have been something else, so I don't have to deal with my food nearly as much. But I actually just use all the food for an extra population and then use one of my reserves for more food later. I go up to 70, and this is totally fine. I take the rockets and the satellites. I want to make it not possible for Skaiwalker to go get a Nobel Prize. And then mechanized agriculture actually drops down to here on 3 civil actions. So you'll see that he has kind of an issue. You'll see that Skywalker doesn't have enough turns to go for a Nobel Prize if he wanted to. So yeah. So Skywalker wins the war by a little bit. If there was another turn, he could win the war by a lot, but I have such a huge cultural lead, I don't think it would have really mattered. So he's trying to guarantee his second place against Kimmo, finishes fast food chains, develops computers, and you can see that he doesn't have enough actions to take Mech Ag and develop it for a Nobel Prize. And then Kimmo finishes Internet for like 8 points or 11 points or something. That's pretty much it. So, like I said, pretty confident about my finish. Yeah, impacts are good for me. There's only 2 of them. Architecture is mine, and then science is Skywalker's. Science actually was pretty close after he destroyed a multimedia. So that would have been funny if I won Impact of Science too. But didn't really matter. I think that at the beginning of Age 2, once I got those plunders off of Kimmo, and yeah, because I got that mechanized army pretty early, I felt pretty good. I felt like it was a pretty good spot. When you build a whole pair every single turn with Shakespeare without having to disband, and you still have a ton of resources, you're in a really, really good place in the game. Plus, I had, basically the best tactic you can get. So I was never really in a tough spot. I never really had to make tough decisions in this game. And, finished Hollywood for 56. Even though that was a greedy play, I had so much culture, it just didn't matter. So, in any case, this is the 5th game that's finished from, like I said earlier, this is the 5th game that finished in my group. So we can see the standings. And you can see that I won all my games so far. Gul'dan, who I played in the first set, he's won his other 2 games since losing the first one. Skywalker, I played him twice. He took second twice, and he got second his last game. And then Kimmo and Claw are bringing up the rear with the same score here. One of the things about Claw is that Claw has already played 2 games against me. So maybe that's an advantage since I've only played against Kimmo once. It's a little bit tougher. I guess I'm just trying to say that I'm the bad guy in this group, I guess, since I've played all 3 games that I've played, I've kind of won with a pretty big margin. You can see here that this was the closest game that I had. It was about a 70-point lead. The others were a little bit closer. Well, I guess this was... Whoa. Okay, one of them was like 80 points, and the other one was like 100. But in any case, yeah. Anyways, that's it for now. Hope you enjoyed watching this game, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time.